All right, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. I'm telling you, I was walking down the street today. All I could think about was weather. And I opened my eyes and I saw my favorite meteorologist, Andrew Haggen from the National Hurricane Center. So I said, Andrew, get over here right now. And he did. He's here right now. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm here, doing great, Greg.
Okay.
Glad to be on again.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to talk El Nino and La Nina. What are they? What are they all about? How are they affecting the weather? And why do we always hear about them and not really know what's going on? So let's just talk generally speaking. What El Nino, La Nina, what are they?
So El Nino and La Nina are naturally occurring phenomena that occur every 2 to 7 years on average. And it has to do with the warming of this. El Nino has to do with the warming of the sea surface temperatures, the ocean temperatures in the eastern Pacific Ocean off the coast of South America. And the effect of this warming has effects on the weather patterns really all over the world. And so it can be very interesting because El Nino is a warming of those waters and La Nina is a cooling of those waters. And like, for example, in the southeastern United States, when there's an El Nino, you have a drier and cooler conditions during the winter time, especially. And, in various parts of the US and the world, it could either be much warmer or colder than normal, or it's just a redistribution of the precipitation and temperature patterns around the world that makes it significantly different from normal. Those are the effects of a strong El Nino or a strong La Nina.
So when you say 2 to 7 years, that's just on average how long these systems take to be in effect.
Well, usually actually an El Nino event will last about 1 year, but you'll see the next El Nino come in 2 to 7 years into the future.
All right. And so does it have to do with, winter, summer, fall, that kind of stuff? Is it a seasonal
So
phenomenon?
El Ninos are most pronounced during Northern Hemisphere winter. During the summer, you can still see some minor effects from El Nino, but the magnitude of these effects can be enhanced during the winter time.
And if you have an El Nino, do you also have a La Nina, or is one thing interdependent upon the other? Or
well, it's interesting because we've seen some of the strong El Ninos like in 1997 and 1983, for example, and even a later one in 2015. A lot of these stronger El Ninos are followed by a La Nina the next year. Now, this doesn't always happen, but it is something that we've seen happen quite a bit of the time.
So are either of these conditions in effect right now?
Right now, there's neutral conditions, which means like the water temperatures off of South America they're pretty close to normal. So right now there's not an El Nino occurring, but the predictions are that we're likely to go into a La Nina as we get into the fall months this year.
All right. So from the only thing that I know was I read somewhere that La Nina, is going to affect the weather pattern, like let's just say in the western part of the United States and as far away as Australia at the same time, but it affects it in completely different ways.
Yes, because the temperature of the pattern of the water temperatures over the Pacific Ocean are different than normal. Like normally you have the warmest water in the Western Pacific, like closer to Asia and Indonesia, and you have the coolest water off of South America in the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean. But during El Nino, that's flipped. And when you have a redistribution of water temperatures, that changes like the atmospheric pressure patterns, and it just changes areas that get more precipitation or less precipitation. And so like your normal weather pattern for that year will be, different or abnormal compared to most years if you have a strong El Nino. But one of the things about El Nino or La Nina is, it's a whole spectrum. You can have a strong El Nino way over here, and then in the middle, it's neutral. And then all the way over here, you have a strong La Nina, but you could also have a weak El Nino or a weak La Nina, which is fairly close to neutral. And there might be some of those impacts of an El Nino if you have a weak El Nino, but unless it's a moderate or a strong El Nino, it won't be that big of an effect.
Are these phenomena? Are they considered phenomenon or conditions or weather patterns? What's the terminology?
Well, the official name for an El Nino is the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And it's just about, different oscillations on where the warmest water and where the warmest air is situated on Earth. And normally, you have average conditions over many, many years. Scientists have measured normal conditions, but if the water temperatures over a huge area are more than 1 degree below normal or 1 degree above normal, then that's a significant amount when it comes to talking about ocean temperatures.
Are these things related to climate change? I mean, I know
No,
everything
so-
really gets down to that question.
Well, El Nino and La Nina are completely natural, but there are scientists that are studying whether climate change is causing there to be maybe more El Ninos or fewer El Ninos or more La Ninas. So that's an area of very active research. And about 10 or 15 years ago, there were a lot of studies that showed that they think that climate change is causing more El Ninos, but in the past decade, that's not necessarily the case. So there's still a lot more research that needs to be done on how climate change may affect El Nino and La Ninas.
Are these things happening more frequently now? Or is this just something that over the course of time is, pretty much regular occurrences?
Yeah, so there's no evidence that El Ninos are becoming more frequent yet. I mean, there have been a few papers that show that maybe they're becoming more frequent, but there's not very strong evidence of that right now.
So we shouldn't freak out when we see El Nino conditions or La Nina is going to take over for the next period of time.
No, I mean, for some people, El Nino is bad news because, like, for example, fishermen in South America, whenever there's an El Nino, the fish don't come and they can't catch any fish for that year because the fish needed the cooler water. If the water's too warm, those fish won't be there.
Yeah.
So, things like that. And it could affect farmers somewhere because if maybe El Nino means it's going to be much drier than normal for that, that area. So yeah, it affects certain people, like certain people who really depend on the weather, kind of keep up with all those things. And they know if it's going to be an El Nino or a La Nina, that they can expect, something to happen for their farm or their business or whatever their interest is that year. And one interesting thing for people in Florida and the coast of the United States is that during El Ninos, that typically means there's going to be less hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean, and there's going to be more in the Pacific, which doesn't affect the southeastern U.S. But when there's a La Nina, that means there's going to be more hurricanes in the Atlantic. So this year it's probably going to be a weak La Nina, which is one of the reasons why all the hurricane predictions were above normal for this year.
All right. So I guess from my perspective, that sounds good, but it sounds like, what's good for us might not be good for the other side of the world. So I'll leave it on that. I mean, I think that we cover most of the interesting components of this discussion. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it.
All right. Well, listen, Andrew, thanks for appearing today, showing up, just coming up out of the blue. All right. And that'll do it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. If you got questions, it could be anything: weather, science, sports, law. Let me know. All right. Have a good day, everybody, and stay safe.